back to Atypical Talk. This is a podcast where we have conversations that illuminate the intersection of faith, culture, and the common spaces of our humanity. I'm Abby.
I'm Allison.
And I'm Joel.
And we have a big question to start today. So are you most likely to be convinced to believe in aliens, ghosts, or cryptids?
So full disclosure, I had to Google
What's
cryptid.
a cryptid?
Yeah, okay. So
Let's start there.
A cryptid is any creature that is maybe not real, like it's not recognized by science. So you think of things like the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. Chupacabra. Yeah, things like
Yetis.
that. Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Not the cup.
Yes.
That's a cryptid. Okay.
Uh-huh.
So ghosts,
Aliens. Or
cryptids.
cryptids.
What am I most likely to believe?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
Well, being that I'm a follower of Jesus and I trust the scriptures, I kind of have to believe in spirits, things beyond what I can actually see, forces and things like that. You know, there's the whole thing of, God the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, and believing in some way of understanding spiritual realities beyond what I could touch, taste, and feel. So yeah, I'll go there naturally. But beyond that, I would say probably aliens. There's just, and it wigs me out. Sometimes I have weird feelings about it, and I know it has all messy theological implications and things like that. Like, did Jesus die for the sins of the aliens? All that kind of stuff. But it's just kind of wild to think that we're the only thing in this vast universe and then multiple solar systems. It's just, I don't know, it almost feels a little arrogant to think that we're the only things out there. And maybe that's part of the way that God made it. But I think, there's been all this stuff about UFOs in the last couple of years too. I'm like, oh, there might be something else out there. So I'd probably go, first ghost spirits. I'm there, probably it wouldn't take a ton of persuading to believe in aliens of some kind.
I know. So same, argument or whatever about ghosts, but also cryptids. I don't know. After I was looking at it more, I was like, okay, I've gone to Scotland. I looked for the Loch Ness Monster.
But did you find it?
No. I would not be mad if while on some random hike sometime I came across Bigfoot either. So I'm just saying, I'm looking. So, maybe there's hope out there that I'll find something eventually.
I just always come back to with cryptids. I'm like, there have been so many people looking. And, and there's not a vast conspiracy of people I found it, but I'm never going to tell. Yeah. People are looking. If they haven't yet, I don't know.
Yeah.
It's kind of
Have
wild.
you guys ever seen Harry and the Hendersons?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wait. Is that the old one?
It's an 80s.
Oh,
it's such an old movie.
Bigfoot.
Oh, yeah.
Yes,
John
yeah.
Lithgow,
That's very in the back of my brain. I am remembering this now that you mention it.
I mean, I'm just saying.
Yeah.
I've seen it happen.
If Hollywood did it, then
Yeah.
It must be true. What about you, Abby?
I could easily be convinced to believe in any of these, but I think
Easily. I like this.
But I think most of all, probably cryptids, just because, you have the wide reaches of Appalachia where there's so many deep forests and stuff, and people hear creepy things where they believe that they're being, they hear their own voice being, or their own name being called and stuff. People think it's a Wendigo trying to lure them in. And all of these stories, I love them. So I grew up watching this show on the History Channel called Monster Hunter, where people were looking for things like this. And so,
And it got canceled because they didn't find anything, Abby. That's why.
But there were some things like chupacabras. They had so much evidence for it. I'm like, this should be a real animal at this point. Why is it not?
It's kind of like Megalodon, the ginormous shark that they on Shark Week, if you ever watch it. Every single time they're looking for it.
No,
I'm here.
It's definitely out there. Yeah.
But you
certain.
guys, you hear yourselves.
Yes,
Everybody's
we
looking.
do hear ourselves.
No one's found it, but it's definitely out there.
Maybe it'll be Abby and I. We're just gonna have to quit our job and go look.
Well,
Yep.
Good excuse. Good
Sorry, Joel.
excuse.
Yeah. So our first topic today is a Relevant magazine article by Emily McFarland Miller titled, "What Does the Bible Say About Ghosts?" Nearly 1 in 5 Americans believe in ghosts and believe they have seen a ghost in their lifetime, according to a 2009 poll done by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life. Eric James, author of the book Are Ghosts Biblical, said there are a lot of people with an interest in the paranormal, but they don't feel like they can go to a pastor. If you don't get an answer from a Christian leader, you're going to go look somewhere else. And where are you going to find your answers? Probably not where a lot of ministers want you to find your answers. That's where people get into using Ouija boards and different things like that. The Bible is very clear on 2 points, on which nearly all denominations agree. First, any spirit that is not God is not to be trifled with. The Bible repeatedly and firmly condemns seeking out the dead. Second, and crucially, diabolical spirits can and do take on kindly appearances. This can mean looking like angelic beings or perhaps deceased loved ones. All spirits are to be tested against what we know from Scripture. There are some believers like James who point to Scripture passages he believes allow for the possibility of ghosts. He points to verses that suggest the soul may sleep or enter a holding place until Judgment Day, such as Revelation chapter 20, verses 11 through 15, and Matthew chapter 26, verses 31 through 46. Others point to 1 Samuel 28, 7 through 20, in which King Saul uses a medium, referred to as the Witch of Endor, to communicate with the dead spirit of God's prophet Samuel. So what were your thoughts on ghosts before and after reading this article?
Yeah, like I mentioned earlier, I feel like I'm there in some regard to there being an unseen reality. Maybe more so from what I understand from the scriptures and my upbringing in the Christian tradition than what I've experienced personally. But yeah, it doesn't take me long to get there. I think the question of like, is it dangerous to explore? You know, like that is, sometimes there's this fear of like even broaching this topic. And I don't think that's the case at all. I think we should have the freedom to explore what we believe about everything. And we should test it and ask questions about it. Because if our faith and our worldview cannot be questioned or tested, then it's not really worth anything. So yeah, I think we should explore what we believe about it. So I don't think that's dangerous at all. But at the same time, I do find it to be problematic and dangerous to become obsessed about this topic. And I think sometimes some people that I've come across, and this is like all they want to talk about. And I think sometimes that can be problematic and sort of neglect some of the greater things that we're called to do in the here and now, and love and serve and be present with the people that are around us physically. So yeah, I think to understand what we think about it or to explore the topic, yeah, go right ahead. And I think the scriptures will give us a pretty clear answer, and seek out spiritual counsel, or you can read a ton about it, I'm sure. But obsessing about it, probably dangerous, problematic at the very least. And I also would say like there's some danger to becoming like terrified about these realities. Sometimes our obsession with things we can't see, it can become like this paranoia and this, what you look for, you will find reality. And if you're thinking about this all the time, you're only seeing these things. They're like popping off the page. They're popping in front of you, maybe metaphorically or not. And, you know, I think what the article talked about briefly was just understanding how God is over any of these spirits, powers, ghosts, if you will, like any kind of spiritual reality. Paul, writing to the church in Ephesus, just 19 verses into his letter there, he talks about the power of God, and he says that power is the same power as the mighty strength that he exerted when he raised Christ from the dead and seated him at his right hand in the heavenly realms. For above all rule and authority, power and dominion, and every name that is ever invoked, not only be in the present age, but also in the one to come, is God's. And God placed all things under Christ's feet. So I think you look at that reality that, yeah, there can be these things, but if you are in Christ and if you're trusting Jesus, there's nothing to be afraid of inside of these realities. So not to obsess about it and ignore people in front of you, not to obsess about it and be paranoid, but understand that God is above it. But it is good to understand, you know, what we believe about it and what we think about it. And honestly, this is something that I'm probably not I couldn't write my dissertation right now of what I believe about it, because it's just in my past and in my life experience, it's not something I've spent a ton of time worrying about, not a ton of time even studying about. I think I'm entertained by stories about it, but in my mind, there's a bit more of a divide where maybe I haven't given enough thought into this topic.
Well, that was kind of what I was going to say, is honestly, I haven't really thought too much about ghosts, so I can't say I have kind of this pre-notion of what I had thought before or after I read the article, but I've never, the article talked about them being like these demonic spirits, and I've never thought of ghosts, I guess, in that way necessarily. But you said your mom kind of did when you were growing up.
It's like horror movies and things like that where it was ghosts. She didn't want us watching that stuff because she thought that it was, demons that it was talking about in these movies and things like that. And I've heard a lot of Christians talk about that, saying that they think ghosts are just demons trying to fool us or draw us in or whatever. But I mean, I also have heard a lot of stories of people experiencing ghosts where it doesn't seem like there's anything evil necessarily there. And so I don't know. I kind of push back on that a little bit. Like, I heard a story the other day, obviously it could be fake, but it was a story about this little kid who had an imaginary friend and stuff, and they found out years later that the farmer who lived at that house before them, that was the farmer's name, was the name of the imaginary friend. And so they thought that there was like his ghost on the farm still or something.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's weird.
Yeah.
I know. It's, and you'd never want to like discount somebody's experience because we haven't lived there. So I have no idea what causes, people to feel like they've seen ghosts or experienced that kind of thing. But like you mentioned, Joel, like, I also feel like people should have this safe space that they feel like they can ask questions or bring these things to light and not feel shamed or judged or scrutinized because they are asking more questions about their faith or ghosts or whatever topic it is. So I don't know. It just causes a little tension when it makes you wonder, I guess, why some of these pastors or these churches like are afraid of people asking questions.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think, again, in the faith space, in the Christian faith space, like, you don't get very far without coming face to face with there's something more. I mean, especially in the work of Jesus, like, it's uncomfortable for us in our modern world to even reckon with how often in Jesus' ministry he was facing down an evil spirit or someone that was possessed. I mean, that's just such a part of the world that Jesus lived in, to which, I would say that, the world then it's the world now. And so I don't think it's something that you can even shy away from. To me, the question always practically comes back to, what space do you allow this to take in your understanding of the world? Like, is this a dominant thing where you're seeing it everywhere and it's the only thing you want to talk about? Or are you understanding, that's a part of this space that we live in, this overlap of the eternal and now, but Jesus is still over that. There's nothing to be fearful of. And we can trust that there's a God who's holding it all together, who's bigger than the realities that might scare us or might be beyond what we can understand. And I think that's a healthy way to hold it, and not become obsessed or paranoid or so fearful about it.
Yeah.
And also Casper the Friendly Ghost.
Yeah.
I mean,
Friendly ghost.
What? Come on, you guys.
Ghost.
Yeah. It's in his name.
What could possibly be wrong?
Yeah.
Our second article today is a Today article by Alex Porty. It says, here's what the 81-year-old best friends who traveled the world want to do next. Sandy Hazlip and Ellie Hamby are longtime friends who wanted to do something special together for their 80th birthdays. Hazlip proposed the idea to travel the world in 80 days for their 80th birthday. Due to COVID, their travel plans got delayed, but on January 11, 2023, at the age of 81 years old, the pair started their journey, disembarking from their homes in Dallas, Texas. Their first stop was Antarctica. Their trip included taking in the northern lights of Lapland at the North Pole, the deserts of Africa, and the great ancient structures of Rome. They rode a sleigh pulled by huskies in Finland, flew high in a hot air balloon in Egypt, and spent time searching for wallabies in Australia. For 6 days, they explored the streets of Bali, and for 2, they braced themselves as they weathered a rocky ship ride across the notoriously rough Drake Passage. Their website, aroundtheworldat80.com, says, "Our greatest joy is mingling with the locals. When you travel as independent travelers, nothing ever goes as planned. So fortunately, we share the same travel philosophy of an old Arab proverb. It says perfectly, trust in God, but tie your camel." I love that.
I'm going to start using that.
"We've had many travel crises, but at least we haven't been arrested. Well, we have come close," they said. The pair have begun planning their next adventure and said to stay tuned for the big reveal in a few weeks. So what was your reaction to reading this article and hearing about these 2 women?
I love this so much. Like, I want to be these ladies when I grow up. Who's coming with me? That's the question. I just love it because there's so many places in the world that I want to see. And, you know, when you've got young kids and stuff like that, sometimes it's harder to travel. So I just think about, you know, being able to do this and hopefully having as good a health as they have at 80 to be able to just pick up and go wherever you want for the next 80 days. But meeting new people and just interacting with the culture and seeing new places, like that sets my heart on fire. I love that kind of stuff so much. So
yeah. No, I absolutely loved it. I guess it was trending on TikTok and everything too. It said in the article. I never came across it.
I missed it.
Yeah,
Joel on his TikTok. But honestly, this is my jam, so I don't know how it didn't show up on mine either.
I know. It's surprising, but no, I love their story and just hearing about all of it and seeing their pictures too. One of the women, I can't remember which one, she's a photographer, so their pictures look incredible.
Stunning.
Yes, yeah. So it's so cool to look at their website and read their stories.
It's a much better version of 80 for Brady.
Yeah, exactly.
Much more of an adventure than going to see Tom Brady, most evil,
Yeah.
best quarterback of all time. Yeah, I think just when you look at the way that they were approaching this birthday and the way that they were still wanting to have that adventure, you know, at that age. I mean, I feel like so often what I experience are people just getting to a place where they have the most freedom of time, probably the most freedom of resources, but they almost like kind of pack it up and they're just going to, no offense to golfers, but like just go golf, drink beer and come home kind of thing. You know what I mean? And like not explore or live as an adventure. And you think about like, there was adventure in their story. There was danger and uncertainty in their story, especially when you were a more seasoned adult, being 80, 81 years old. But it just seemed like they were determined to live their life like it was a work of art and an adventure instead of just, well, I put in my time, now I'm going to sit back, right? And I think there's something inspiring about that. You know, turning 36 this week, I'm thinking, okay, well, yeah, well, I'm getting old, you know, but like, you know, you can get into that standpoint or that viewpoint, if you will. And I'm like, oh, what a great way to like look at your life as a work of art. I was challenged by this quote. I think it was Donald Miller, the author, who said it first, or that I heard say it first, but it was such a challenge. It was brought to my mind at reading this article. He asked this question: if your life was a movie, would anyone go and pay and see it? If your life was a movie, would anybody like pay money to go to a theater, see it, or pay money to stream it, whatever it might look like?
Yeah.
And I think so often we're like, oh, not really. It's kind of boring. And you know, the reality is that we're not living out our life like a piece of art, like an adventure. And we're sort of just going through the paces, what's expected of us, what we have to do just to pay the bills. And that's the end of the story. And the image in the New Testament that we're given to the value of our life is an artistic image, actually. Again, in Paul's letter to the church in Ephesus, Ephesians chapter 2, verse 10, this is like youth group, millennial memory verse stuff here. But Paul says this about the church, the people of God. He says, for we are God's handiwork, created in Christ Jesus to do good works, which God prepared in advance for us to do. The word handiwork there can be translated sometimes to masterpiece, but it's actually the Greek word poema, which is not directly a poem, what we would think of today, but it's something that has been fashioned, designed meticulously, like an artisan kind of work with passion. And to think like, oh, that's how God sees our life, then why do we live it in just this mundane check in, check out, just getting by kind of way? Because God sees it as so much more. And I love these picture of these women who are still living their life as an adventure, as more of a work of art than just an exercise in futility, which I liked a lot. I think that was cool.
Well, and for me too, like having a trip or an adventure or something, even if it's a vacation, if it's just a weekend, like having something to look forward to, like on hard days too, makes, you know, I don't know, it just gives me something to look forward to. Because even if a day is like ho-hum or whatever, like I'm like, oh, well, in a few weeks, I'm going to do this, or I get to do this. And so there's a lot of like mental health benefits to getting out and having adventures and trying new things and meeting up with new people. So I love it. Here for it all the time.
Yes. Yeah. So I know, Allison, you said that you wanted to do this, but you didn't know who would be your travel partner. If you could travel the world with any celebrity, dead or alive, who are you taking with you?
Oh my gosh. That's a hard question because I would want somebody that would be fun, up for anything, but also if I get hangry or, you know, travel plans don't go according to plan necessarily, can, you know, also just kind of calm my chill a little bit. So I was thinking like, I don't know, Reese Witherspoon seems really fun. Yeah. Also, I wouldn't mind going with like Lizzo. Like, I think we would have a great time if she wants to go. Just call me up. But yeah, just somebody that inevitably is going to be down for a good time, willing to try anything, and, you know, can calm my crazy when travel plans inevitably go sideways. Yeah. What about you?
So when I travel, one thing I'm always looking for is just cool animals, and I want to always see, you know, the native animals to wherever I am. So I think I'd want someone who knows a lot about where to find them. Yeah. So I'm choosing Steve Irwin.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, bringing him back.
Yeah. So I think
that's why she added the dead or alive. So
yeah. So I can get around that. But
crikey.
He knows where to find animals. He's not afraid to get up close and personal with them, and I think he just seemed like a fun guy too.
He can wrestle them to the ground, and then you can just pet them and walk away.
So that is my choice. What about you, Joel?
I had to really think about this, but after a couple minutes, I thought it'd be quite the adventure to just travel with Bono from U2, because I feel like I would need someone who's seen it all before in some way, like sort of a guide, and somebody who's traveled the world being in music. It'd be fun being around creatives and music, and I think it would just be a great conversation. And he's a guy that I'd like to sit down and have a coffee or a meal with anyway. So I think that'd be cool. Also, he's probably going to travel in style, which would be pretty nice, pretty fancy. But at the same time, he grew up in the poorer side of Dublin, and he still loves finding the little hole-in-the-wall pubs and places that he can sort of escape celebrity from. So I think that would be fun to sort of see some of the cracks in the walls and those small places where he would escape celebrity, because I wouldn't want to be around crowds like that all the time either. So I think I'd be able to see the world, be around music and creative people, have good conversations, travel in style, but also get to like kick back and find a little hole in the wall pub as well.
Our final article today is a BBC article by Amanda Ruggieri. It's called The Rise of One and Done Parenting. This article discusses the growing trend of parents who choose to have only one child. The article explains that while historically having multiple children was the norm, more and more parents are deciding that one child is enough for them. The article cites various reasons for this trend, including the increasing cost of raising children, the desire for a better work-life balance, and concerns about the impact of overpopulation on the environment. The article also explores some of the challenges that parents with only one child may face, such as social isolation and pressure from society to have more children. Investigative journalist Lauren Sandler, author of One and Only, The Freedom of Having an Only Child and the Joy of Being One, says that millennials are growing up forced to be more hard-nosed about life's challenges. We haven't decided to make higher education affordable or change our tax system so that there's a middle class again, or put a cap on inflated housing costs, or do any of the things that make a viable life possible, she says. How on earth do I bring a kid into that mix? And how on earth do I then bring two kids into that mix? So what were your guys' thoughts reading this article? Both of you have two kids, and so obviously neither of you went with the one and done parenting route. So what were your thoughts reading this?
But it's interesting, though, because, I had one sibling. You grew up as an only child, right?
Yeah, I did.
And then Abby, you have a few siblings?
I have 8 siblings.
8
yeah.
siblings. Okay, I wanted to get the correct.
Yeah,
couple.
So there is diversity on
Yeah.
the panel today about that.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I mean, first blush, a couple things. You talk about. Well, first let's start here. I don't think it's wrong in any way, shape, or form. I don't read about one and done and be like, oh, that's evil, sinful, anything like that. My family is not a one size fits all. It's not for everyone to have kids, and that's okay. And it's not wrong to have big family, small family. I don't really have a dog in that fight. I can only speak from my experience of having one sibling who is about 2 years younger than me. And on the whole, it was healthy. I think it was healthy for me as a person, and it worked well for us. As annoying as it was having a younger brother, and as annoying as I was probably as an older brother from time to time or all the time, there were parts of it about having a sibling that was healthy and maturing. I mean, I got that daily practice and opportunity for one anothering at home.
Yeah.
To where, called in the New Testament is all these one anothering commands, like forgive one another, honor one another above yourself, share with one another, be patient, bear with one another, live in harmony with one another. Because I couldn't escape that, I didn't have a place where I could just not, because I had to do it at school and then at home. I think it grew that inside of me. And it's imperfect as it was, it sort of gave my family and myself a lab of how to work it out at home before I'm fully mature and leave to do so. Not saying that I was fully mature by the end of it either, but I think it was healthy. And that's one of the reasons why my wife and I wanted to have more than one child. I married an only child as well. Yeah. So she had that experience as an only child. She wanted our son Jack to have a sibling. And so that's sort of where we got there. That was just for us. A couple things I think I just have a little bit of questions or pushback on in the article, or maybe the thinking of one and done parenting, is like sort of the fear of what world are we bringing our kids into. Like, doesn't every generation have that?
Yeah.
Like in some ways.
I was pregnant during 9/11.
Yeah,
so,
yeah.
You
So,
for sure have that.
You think back on, maybe the parents, our parents are mostly boomers, but before that, the world wars were a reality, right? To where it was the most violent time in human history. And even though there's still terrible violence and terrorism, we are living in the least violent period of time in human history overall, because there's not global wars going on right now. So that's gotten better. Discrimination based on color or any different kind of way that people live their life, there's still a lot of room to grow in that, but it's the most accepting time, at least in America, that we've ever had from different kinds of people. And again, we have lots of room to grow in that. And yeah, things are expensive, but inflation was higher in the early 80s, late 70s than it was today. And there's a lot of things that are just not as bad as it was in maybe our parents' lifetime, even that. So I think every generation can try to play that card, and does try to play that card of, I just don't know, it's just so bad out there, because I think it's our anxieties just through the roof and we don't know how to deal with it in some ways. So I would push back against that notion for me. But
Yeah. I, growing up as an only child, I had people, tell me that I was spoiled, or that like I wasn't going to be able to share, or that I was entitled or whatever. And, I could look around at a lot of people I know with siblings who are also the same way. And so I'm like, that narrative doesn't really work for me. The logic falls apart. And, the article talks about like the financial barrier, and I don't think that that's necessarily the case. Some women have really terrible, tragic pregnancies and don't want to do that again. So rightfully so. Some women have careers that they really love and want to be able to balance, having a family and still being able to have a successful career. Some, don't want to have to choose either. So, I was reading something the other day about somebody who only has has one child because they don't want to be the mom that has to decide whether they go to that kid's sporting event or that kid's sporting event, because they're playing at the same time and you can't be two places at once. And so with an only child, that takes the choice away. You're always at that one kid's events. And so, there's a lot of reasons why, someone may choose to only have one child. I had a perfectly content childhood as an only child. So, it's okay because I'm also, slightly introverted. So being able to have that space to myself was also probably a good thing for me growing up. So.
Yeah.
So here's my question, though. You were an only child, but you chose to have two. Why?
Yeah. Well, Nick, my husband, also, for those who don't know him, I guess, he grew up with a sibling as well. And so it was just one of those, he was a lot like you, saw a lot of benefit in, having somebody there and just that relationship. And I was not, dead set on only having one or, so yeah. So now we have two girls. Did they always get along? No.
No, it's never guaranteed there, right?
But my hope is, as they get older, that relationship will get, stronger and closer and they'll have each other. So I do see definitely benefit to having more than one.
Yeah. I mean, growing up with 8 siblings, I think there was a lot of, times where I was like, I hate having siblings. They're the most annoying thing in the world. But, as we've gotten older, we're so close and it's so great when I'm able to like be with all of them and stuff. And so I think, it's just going to be so different for people. And I mean, some people are completely content being an only child and they don't need a sibling and stuff. So I think it just, I understand a lot of the reasonings that parents were giving in the article, and I agree, like thinking, what am I bringing my kid into? It's going to keep being like that forever. It's
always
the world is going to be, there's going to be evil in the world no matter what. And so
taking different shapes and forms during seasons, right? But I do think it's interesting too, like, because I think something about having children is an identity question, right? About who we are. You get to a certain age where you're like, well, this is what I'm supposed to do, or this is my legacy. And there's all these identity of who we are wrapped up into the kinds of families we have, if we do have families, if we don't have families. And so I think like, there's really no right size fits all. And maybe for you and your family situation, you don't want to have kids, or maybe you want to adopt, or maybe you just want to be a married couple. And there's no like hierarchy of like, this is the pinnacle of being a human when it comes to this, and you are less than because you don't have kids, or you don't have kids in that way, or you only have one kid. And those are just the dividing lines that just aren't interesting to me. They don't get us anywhere. It just sort of tears us down and beats us up internally. So I mean, I guess just one final note on that, no matter where you are on the parenting journey, if you have kids, if you want to have more kids, if you don't have kids and you don't know if you want to have kids, like, that's okay. That doesn't change who God sees you to be and the value that you have. And don't let a cultural norm tell you something that, God is telling you otherwise about. And so just if you're listening, whatever this looks like for you, know that you're loved, know that you're cherished, know that you are enough because you're you. And I think that's a hopeful note for all of us.
Well, thanks for tuning into this episode of Atypical Talk. If you have any questions, you can email those to atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can also email suggestions for topics you want us to talk about to that as well. Again, atypicaltalkpod@gmail.com. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook at atypicaltalkpod. Make sure to subscribe on your favorite podcast platform. We hope that these conversations today have helped you think wider, love deeper, and partner with God to bring the up there, down here in your everyday life. Thanks for listening.